Mine. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this wonderful session. And as sir explained, I am the Global Product Manager, MGS 100, which is a small microgrid system. MGS stands for Microgrid System, and very much part of the product, right from the product development to product launch to the operations. I was involved in this particular product, and being involved into one single company for longer time, so we always get visibility or point of view from the product point of view. I'll try to keep this presentation as generic as possible, and without wasting much of a time, let us proceed with the presentation. Well, and as sir was explaining, my all the experience, I joined ABB as a management trainee, and last year 2019, ABB Solar, the solar business of ABB was divested to an Italian company, which was again a 68-year-old company called Femar, which is based out of Italy, Vimercate, Italy. And now, as on 1st of April 2020, we are now part of a Femar entity. So currently, the company in India is called as Marichi Solar India Private Limited, based out of Bangalore. I sit in the same factory as you are seeing in the photograph. And as I said, it's a 68-year-old company and much older to solar than ABB was. And 2020, the acquisition of ABB solar inverter business was completed in almost 87 countries. And now all the technology, IP, assets, everything, including the manpower, technology is being transferred to this company. Now ABB Solar is technically called as a Femar now. So we are all part of the Femar entity. Yes, we do have, with the acquisition, Femar entity is the 4th largest inverter manufacturer in the world, and with more than 43 gigawatt plus of installed capacity in more than 5 continents. We do have manufacturing capability in 3 locations of 11 gigawatts plus in a annual manufacturing capacity. The major factories in India, then we do have factories in Italy as well. Femar is also into EV charging portfolio. We have more than 23,500 installed EV chargers across the world. So this is a brief insight about the product or the company. Without wasting much of our time, let us proceed with the today's topic. So to begin with, probably why we were invited is we do have experiences in all the major landmark projects in India, starting with the world's 2nd largest rooftop projects. We were involved in the component supply and the initial design phase as well. Then we do have our components working in the world's longest canal top solar project in Gujarat. Then also the world's largest single location PV plant that also happens to be in Tamil Nadu in a place called Kamuthi. And we do have world's largest PV plant in the airport, which happens to be in Kochi as well, very near to most of you are located, where you are located. Then we do have, as a community, we do have 150 plus schools in West Bengal, which are powering by our inverters. And our inverters will continue to use ABB logo for further period of 1 or 2 years, and later on it will be transferred to Femar. So this was brief small introduction about our company, because Femar was a name which was very new to most of you. And as far as today's session goes, so we have to shape the future of energy through microgrids. So let us look at the introduction perspective of that. So here we are focus our presentation to India specific mostly, and mostly with respect to the issues which we are facing in India. First and foremost important thing is there are 500 plus million people in India who have limited or no access to electricity. So it is very interesting if you see that there are more than 3,000 plus not connected, no grid connection to the villages in more than 3,000 plus villages in India. And there are 200 million plus population in India have no access to power of any sort, even though the villages are electrified. Well, this might look very strange because we do see that 99.6% or 100% of the villages are electrified according to the government number, but the government definition of village electrification says that reaching power to the main center of the village and electrifying 10% of the households. So that is called as electrification of the village. So there are still 200 plus million population where there is a grid available nearby, maybe 1 or 2 kilometers range, but their houses are not connected. Then what happens is next we call it as something like a weak grid. Even though many villages are connected with grid, there is no power available to them for more than 16 to 20 hours in a day. So less than 4 hours in a day, and usually these 4 hours will be somewhere in the midnight when probably you don't need the power. So usually what the scenario goes like this: a village will be unelectrified or unconnected, then it will become unconnected houses because there will be some power available to the nearby village, a transmission network or a distribution network. Then it will become something called as a weak grid. Then with the things grows, then you will start getting better power going at, and overall there is a big huge potential of 500 million plus people who are deprived of accessibility to the electricity. The second very interesting and very major issue what India faces is the transmission and distribution losses in India varies between around 20 to 25, 45%, where average losses is around 35%. And technically this might not be the losses per se in the grid, and it also includes something called as theft, which cannot be shown as theft, and they show it as a transmission and distribution loss. And energy deficit is around 6,500 million units, which has drastically come down, I would say, from in the last 5 to 8 years time. So the deficit was as high as 18,000 million units, and it has drastically come down. But still, I would say that India is a country where there is a power shortage and where the demand is more than that of the supply. Next, let us understand the power generation scenario. India has 370 gigawatts of installed capacity, and out of which 230 gigawatts comes from thermal coal, which is coal-fired thermal plants. Then around 45 gigawatts come from large hydro projects, which is typically, I would say, climate dependent, and it cannot work throughout the year. And very small portion of nuclear, and around 87 gigawatts of renewable, which includes solar, wind, biomass, and also the small hydro plants. Going by the thermal, it is very good for base load operations. Then hydro is usually used for clipping of the peaks and addressing the peak loads. But hydro comes at a cost of around high initial cost and developmental risk, and it also usually comes at a cost of the ecosystems nearby. It alters the ecosystem. Whenever you build a big hydro plant, it usually alters the ecosystem of the surroundings. So that's one of the key thing. And one of the notable interesting topic which you can see is the Three Gorges Dam, which is the biggest power plant in the world, which is in China. It is said that the amount of water that was stored in the Three Gorges Dam in fact shifted the rotational axis of the earth by some point, because huge volume of water was stored at one single location. So that is the impact which can cause, which we will not be able to visualize otherwise. So nuclear, very high initial cost again, but it also poses some operational risk as well. Renewable, very clean, and but what happens is it's usually an intermittent source and very not reliable at all. Even though there are 370 gigawatts of installed capacity, the peak load what is observed is around 184 gigawatts if you observe last in 2019, and it is again year dependent. Usually in the monsoon and harvesting time the load increases, which usually comes in between July August time, and the peak load observed was somewhere close to 184 gigawatts last year. And 23% of the power what we have, the installed capacity, is from renewables. And India is the third largest power producer in the world, and also the third largest consumer, next only to US and China. and we do have 17% of the electricity generated is consumed by the agricultural sector, which is also the highest in the world, and it's also the country with highest power theft as far as the power theft goes. And the curve what you are seeing here is a typical load curve. Of course, I couldn't get hold of the latest one, but the curve is exactly similar to this. It is called a typical, the load is like a duck curve, and you see here in the early morning between 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. the load is at the lowest, which is typically somewhere around 120, 122 gigawatts, and that is the reason why you often see that the free power to the villagers are usually given for the agricultural purpose during the midnight time where the loads are lowest. And the first peak comes in the morning time at 9 a.m. when all the officers start switches on their ACs. The power ramp up rate is around 140 megawatt per minute continuously for 40 minutes, which is a very thing. And you can also see a second spike which usually comes at 6 o'clock. What happens is all the residential and commercial establishments like malls and the shopping malls, everyone turns on their lights, and also the residential lighting loads will come into the picture, whereas the late working of office will continue, thereby adding to the evening peak of around 200 megawatt for 40 minutes, 200 megawatt per minute continuously for 40 minutes. So we usually hear, the power operators saying that we have tuned our generators for this ramp and things like that. So one of the notable incidents was when our honorable PM announced that you have to, switch off lights. People, the operators, you were telling that don't switch off, just switch off the light loads, don't switch off the other loads, because it can drastically affect the grid. So we'll see that in the later part of the thing. So this is how they tune the generators for the ramp, and more or less throughout the year it varies slightly, but more or less it is in the shape of a duck. So it is called a duck curve. So let us go into now we have laid the base for the two issues. Now let us start with the smallest one. Let us first understand what exactly is microgrid before we see how we can address those issues with microgrids. See, basically a microgrid is a small scale electricity generation system which serves a defined or definite set of loads which will have usually a small distribution network. So whenever we tell microgrids, it is usually integrated with solar or in some sort of renewable energy, especially solar, because India being a tropical country, the solar is abundantly available across the country in most of the year, at least 250, 300 days in a year. So that is why solar is, inherently becomes part of. So there are, again, when you come to solar, one is the grid tied system where you just add a solar plant like in Cochin International Airport. You install some PV panels where it will be utilized by the local loads and excess will be exported, and usually have a net metering policy there. But such systems cannot be used in a place where there is no grid at all. So in that case, you usually build an off-grid system, which usually have some sort of charging mechanism to charge batteries, and an inverter to convert the battery energy into the AC and transmit it to the loads. Sometimes it can also have additional sources of power like a biomass generator or a diesel generator, just to have as a backup. Then we have one more system which can be grid integrated as well, sometimes a diesel generator, and it also has a lot of breakers and relays and contactors to have a reverse protection for the generators when you're using on generators and things like that. So it is often confused for microgrid. This is a hybrid system where you see that all the sources are connected in parallel without control on most of the sources like grid and generator. It tries to push as much power as possible as it is seeing the loads and the impurities and qualities, bad qualities of the power. If you're using, let's say, biomass, is also passed on to the grid. Then what exactly is microgrid? See, microgrid is something which works like a black box, which can take multiple sources, not only grid, and it can also work isolated from the main grid or without grid as per se. And you can in fact set priorities, which source has to be utilized first and second, like that. And that priorities keeps changing country specific, because in probably in India, diesel power might be the costliest, whereas when we go to Middle East, they would prefer using diesel generator just because of the operating costs are lesser there, because of the fuel cost is less. And with the microgrid system, since it works like a black box, we can have optimal energy mix as we want, and we'll have complete control over each of the power sources. Then we can also have an option to use the other renewable sources like wind and biomass generator, rectify and filter it out the harmonics and rectify its voltage and frequency variations and send it back to the grid if the loads are lesser. And in fact, it can successfully handle the imbalances in the load without any problem. And you can scale it up any point of time. For example, you build a whole microgrid system today without grid, and if tomorrow a grid comes to the nearby, it will be easily be able to take the grid and work along with it. So basically, a microgrid system is something where we can deliver the power seamlessly, because the changing from one source to the another here is seamless, in the sense it happens at a 5 milliseconds level, and the loads will not see any interruption as far as the changing of sources goes. Then also it is very easy to scale up, and you can predict which power, how much you can have. It can have some sort of intelligence built in, like energy forecasting. It can tell that tomorrow because it is rain is forecasted, I am going to generate a very less power, and let me compensate that with wind during night time and charge my batteries to be ready. So such sort of intelligence can be built in. Then it is very easy to control. If you want to tweak and control the outputs, you can do so, and you will always get the quality power out of the microgrid system. So this is I would say, with all these are possible with the microgrid system. So we usually hear these terminologies in whenever we come across microgrids. One is the nanogrid, another one is microgrid, and sometimes mini grid as well. See, nanogrid is clearly has a bifurcation. It is something to do at a individual house level. It never interacts with any other source or to the main grid. It can be sometimes DC as well, directly DC home system they call it. So since you are generating DC from the PV, you can just store it and use it for the DC loads, use DC lights, DC fans, DC TVs, DC washing machines, anything you can use it. So that is usually called as a nanogrid, which makes sense when the number of houses are very less. Let's say a tribal village on top of a hill. So there are very few people, let's say 50, 60 people in around 10, 15 houses. So nanogrid will make sense there. Microgrid is something which will have a centralized generation versus centralized storage, which usually has a small distribution network, not more than 4 to 5 kilometers, usually on the LV level itself, low voltage level itself, it will have a distribution. It can also have some additional sources like a biomass generator in order to have optimal energy mix and the cost of the power. Mini grid is, I would say, a microgrid at a bigger scale in terms of power. It can sometimes have other like diesel generators and other things. So I would say a big village or a town or a factory can be called as a mini grid. Either way, mini grid and microgrid usually means the same. Technically, it was only the power capacities, and cluster of many mini grids will make the grid smart. Thereby, microgrids or mini grids are the building blocks of the smart grids through which we can achieve and deliver the power. So here, when we talk about a village where it is located, let's say 60-70 kilometers away from the nearby grid, so it becomes very impractical for, let's say, 200 people to lay this 60-kilometer transmission line in terms of the infrastructure development and maintenance. So it makes more sense, because sun shines brightly for more than 300 days at most places in India, to install a PV plant there and have a small distribution network and operate. And we do have, typically you see such microgrids coming up in northeastern region and like Bihar, and also in Jharkhand, Orissa, Assam there. And in Bihar and UP alone, we have done more than 300 plus microgrids delivering to each individual villages, and of population not more than 100 people in India alone. So we do have a large potential, because as I was explaining in the beginning slides, 3,000 plus villages could be electrified with microgrids without depending on this, and many IPPs are coming forward to do that. Going ahead, the future of the grid, see what is happening is, now the present we do have transmission at some one place. There is like a highway, grid highway we call it, at a 400 kV or 765 kV level. we transmit, and regional load dispatch centers are responsible for this maintenance. Then transmission network happens, and then there is a state or load dispatch centers. So then they give it to each zones or something like that. So it goes to individual loads like industrial, commercial, residential and agricultural loads. It bifurcates, and any problem here, the loads are affected here. It is more like a one place generation, the other place consumption, usually thousands of kilometers away. So the future of grid is something like a decentralized generation and decentralized consumption, where it can of course have a majority of the generation happening at one place, but it will have intermittent generation sources like a wind and solar, which can work in between and can isolate itself and when needed and work in small clusters of mini grids. And this is how the future of the grid looks like. Going to the product concept, as we told, usually it is like a black box, a microgrid. How it usually works is, let's imagine first it becomes, there's a village which had no power. Now we go and install a PV plant and we install a diesel generator for the backup power. And you see the generation usually happens this way, the peak in 300 days in a year. And this will be the typical load curve where the night time, it is usually residential loads, the load increases. What you store excess will be used in the evening time. Let's say it was cloudy or raining in the monsoon time when the generation is on lower side, what you generate would not be sufficient, and it after the battery discharges to a set point, the generators will be turned on automatically by the microgrid system, usually diesel generator or sometimes biomass generator, and the night loads will be catered by the diesel generator in that case, or the biomass generator. So what will be the scenario when we have a whole energy mix of grid and things? What and all the operating philosophies we can have it in this is, let's say this yellow line is our solar generation and this red line is our load curve. So obviously there is a certain portion of the generation which goes directly to the load. Excess will be used to charge the batteries, and what you charge will be used to discharge the power. Now what happens is, we can have a grid, we call it as a weak grid, which delivers power only for a few hours in a day. So we can have that grid coming at around, certain time. Whenever the grid comes, since being a cheapest source of power in India, we will be able to use that to deliver to loads and keep our batteries intact. And if, let's say, if there are no grids, we can turn on the genset to deliver to loads and also charge our batteries as well. So we can do that and take the battery state of charge to a much higher level. And if the time needs and if the grid needs a power because there is a shortage of power in an adjacent village, we will be able to do so by transferring power from the stored energy of the batteries into the grid so that you can use it for the adjacent village there. Then of course, if there's a grid available and if the batteries are fully charged already in the afternoon, we can also choose it to export it to the grid. Then when we integrate a biomass or a wind generator, the biomass or a wind generator can augment a certain portion of the load, and the rest will be again catered by the PV if PV is available, or the batteries will always kick in to deliver the deficit power whenever required. And if you still want to use like a typical on-grid system, if the grid is of good source and you want to, whenever the grid comes and you want to deliver to load and also charge the batteries, you can do so. So it is all very simple to control, and not necessarily that you should have all the sources at one particular load, but these are the capabilities of any microgrid system per se. So you can choose what time and what source to do what functionality, whether your grid wants to deliver only to load, or a grid wants to deliver to load as well as batteries, or you want to generate to deliver only to load or load and batteries. So these are the things what you can control in a typical microgrids. So with that successful, that small microgrids are the way we can address a situation in any scenario of remote villages, and there is a huge potential, as I said, 3,000 plus villages which could be electrified using microgrids, small microgrids. And one of the examples which we are seeing is in 2017 we did around 2 sites in India, increased it to 40 sites in 2018, increased to 100 in around 80-100 in 2019, and this year we already have 200 plus. So it is there are a lot of potential, and we are seeing that also into our, in the market movements as well. And many IPPs are coming forward to do that. Now let us go to our second issue of the power, to address the power qualities of the grid. And there was two events that happened on 30th and 31st of July 2012. Hopefully most of you remember. So before that, let us understand how the grid is distributed and what are the nature of the grids in India. See, grids are distributed into northern, eastern, western and southern. The southern grid is usually overloaded and the frequency is always lesser, and southern grid constitutes, has 40% of its load is agricultural loads. Eastern grid has huge coal reserves and very less consumption, so that is the reason why there is a lot of power that is being generated in the eastern region is always transmitted to the northern region, and northern region always has highest power consumption whereas lowest generation, so that's why it relies on especially on the eastern grid to supply them the power, and sometimes also in the western region. Western grid is something which is a power surplus states. It also has industrial and I would say the agricultural loads to taking the major part. And let's understand, to understand this 30th and 31st July, one major event happened. 30th July, there was the largest blackout in the history of the world where 40 crore people were affected. And that record was broken of, it was, previous record was held in northern grid again by India in 2001, which where 24 crore people were affected. And the 30th July record was broken the very next day on 31st July, where one more blackout happened where 62 crore people were affected, which constituted half of India's population and around 9% of the world's population. 22 states had no power. There was a blackout and there was absolutely no power in 22 states for at least a period of 8 hours to so few people had no power for continuously for 28 hours. Roughly 32 gigawatt of capacity was taken offline, and this was also an event which the power resumption also was the fastest in the history. There were history of blackouts happening in US and many other places, but the resumption also happened in matter of 15 hours, which was around 80%. The question is, why did this happen? So will this give us some thought process? So it happened because the power consumption was above normal in northern grid, especially in Punjab and Haryana. You have to understand, July being a harvesting season, there are these two states which is predominantly into agriculture and farming. They overload the grid, and we do have examples of the 11 kV distribution grid in Punjab continuously having a voltage of 8.8 kV because of the overload, and you're not supposed to trip. And what happens is, you always see that the farmers load the grid too much and you're not supposed to grid. What happened? They usually end up, the 11 kV operators, the substation operator, usually end up, removing the relay so that it won't trip with under voltage or anything, or either keeping the across bigger limits. But there was a abnormal load overloading on the northern side of the grid. Because of this northern side, there was also a maintenance activity that was happening in one of the two major interconnection lines of 400 kV between western grid and northern grid. So basically you had only half a road to travel in, let's say if you're traveling on a highway. Then because of this overloading, 400 kV breaker tripped in Bina Gwalior line and 32 gigawatt power went offline. This caused cascade of trippings. Ideally, what should have happened was the 11 kV, if it's overloaded, only 11 kV should get isolated, or 66 kV, or if there's 110 or 132, that has to get tripped, then 220, then 400. But unfortunately here, because probably the relays were widened out for this to take this overload of the agriculture, the entire load was transferred and the 400 kV breaker tripped, whereas the downstream breakers did not trip. And 31st July, they again tried to attempt to, charge the transformers, everything with the power available from the nearby NTPC plants. One more line in Agra, they say it was a relay problem and it malfunctioned and it tripped. Again, NTPC had to stop 38% of its generating capacity, causing further blackouts, and 22 states it affected, and 15 hours it took to resume the power. The reason was found that the state load dispatch centers did not respond to the warnings or instructions given by the regional load dispatch centers, and the generation in the western region, which is usually private owned, they were not ready to reduce their generation, and the northern grid were not ready to drop off the loads because it was overloaded. So there was some agencies who did, and one of the notable ones was United States Agency, where they told that such further outages could be averted if you have a network of microgrids like what we saw previously, and a distributed generation like what is the future grid what we saw. Even to this date, yesterday's data, you can go to this NRLDC. It's a very good website to have load dispatch centers websites. Yesterday's data, which we took on the day before yesterday's, you can see that these are the relay setting of 50.05 and 49.9 hertz is recommended by the CA, which is like a rule agency or the guidance agency for the grids. And you see the number of instances where it has crashed on the 28th. Whereas you take on the harvesting time, you can see that if you set a relay at 49.9, it would have tripped like 4 or 5 instances in a time, and you can see the number of times it has crashed even 1 year before, around the same day when the blackout happened. So basically this has continued, and this will be an issue going ahead if you are not addressing with the microgrids. It is just like you are just riding on the luck, and some bad day when the other factors also support, then you will have a problems of grid tripping. This is at 400 kV level. So how do we address such things? The only answer to this is a utility scale storage solutions, which can have the CA to address such overloads whenever it happens. They also tell the generating stations to have 5% of the reserve capacity. That means don't generate more than the 90% or 95% of the generator capacity. Keep that 5% as reserve to address these overloads, intermittent overloads, whenever you see at some point of time, because some generator has tripped or some grid has tripped because of that. But as you see, if 32 gigawatt has gone off, and in 2012, whereas the installation capacity was somewhere around 210 to 20 gigawatts, so it was considerably 15% of the power. So only solution is to have a decentralized storage at various places, and typically a storage system utility scale will have a battery converter and will have a battery system. Typically lead acid, we will see what are the storage media, not necessarily batteries, but that is the widely used, and there are other storage media as well which you can use it. Then the applications what we see is you can have this storage anywhere. So as far as the application goes, we in a campus level, let's say in a college level or in a factory level, we can use it for simple applications like demand or peak shifting and increasing solar cell consumption. If you have a renewable plant, we can increase its consumption. Then you can use it as a typical UPS to have a power backup. And when you have it on the utility side of the meter, for let's say for the DISCOMs or the PGCL and such sort of transmission companies, then you can use it for a peaking capacity, like something that happened on the duck curve. You can see you can use certain storage to shave off those peaks. Then we can also island a system and start immediately. We need not wait for 15 hours like that event happened, and that islanding will happen by itself very easily. Then we can have a wholesale arbitrage, like if there is some generation excess there, we can use it to store and dispatch to some other places. Such logics could be written, and without upgrading the infrastructure, we can use the assets of the existing infrastructure to its maximum by using. We will see how we are going to do it in the further slides. Then we can regulate the frequencies, which you saw one of the problem at the 400 kV level, that if you go to a western grid, it might be always excess. So such things could be our rectified, regulated with this storage. Without wasting much of our time, let us go directly into the charts. First application is very simple. You can have it something called as a load leveling. I would say you should perform this at a 11 kV level or 33 kV distribution level, at a factory level or at a normal substation level. It is nothing but storing power at low periods or light loading periods, and store power here at where the load is low, and use it to shave off the peaks, thereby bringing the burden on the grid infrastructure. So how do we do it? Whenever there is a set point which goes below, we charge the batteries. Whenever it is in between these two, we hold the charge. Then whenever it crosses a set point, we discharge the batteries in order to shave, so that your grid is not loaded. So grid will see still the same load. And whenever it is below, we hold, and again whenever it is exceeding, we discharge the batteries. Whenever it is in between the set points, we do it, and then whenever it is going lower, we charge and be ready for the next peak to address. So if you observe here, in a battery storage system or in an energy storage system, let's call it as a ESS, energy storage system, we can do only two things. Either you can charge the power, you can charge the batteries or discharge the batteries, or you can store the energy or unstore the energy. So how fast are you storing or unstoring will determine the application. If you see here, the time period of such application is in a few hours. Then next comes is the frequency regulation, which we saw. If we, let's say, if we have such sort of a storage at every 33 kV or every 66 kV substation, how it would have cost. So it will, we had this a military which was running diesel generator 24/7/365. We could replace, use a microgrid, thereby bringing the carbon footprint and also the operating cost. And it was 100 kilowatt of plant there, and where their batteries have a 48-hour autonomy to run 11 kilowatt of critical radar loads. That happens to be in Myanmar. Similar concept we are also trying to work with Indian Coast Guards through BL and other government agencies. So there is a huge potential again from the government push is there for such things, where they want to bring down the diesel consumption. And this usually being an island, Coco Island, and the monsoon is so bad that 3 to 4 days you cannot reach these islands. So if there is a no diesel available in diesel generator, you will have no radars or no satellite tracking stations continuously if the weather goes bad. But whereas now, since it's commissioning for more than 1.5 years now, absolutely no problem. They are very happy. And now the entire Coco Island, which includes the residential quarters also, 500 kilowatt plant, which the tender was closed only a couple of weeks back. There were almost 8 to 10 parties. They opened, the government Ministry of Energy, to be precise, of Myanmar, opened the tender for whole island microgrid, which was 500 kilowatt in the same Coco Island. So that was closed in a couple of weeks back. This is one more village, and you also have examples working in a government agencies as well. So it can work with different makes of batteries, different age of batteries, and it can still work. And it is a demonstration site, and where we are planning to have multiple orders coming from them. So this is about the things what you can do, and I think I've exceeded my time. Sir, you want to know anything else in particular, or you want to have some sort of or shall we take up the Q&As?
Varghese sir, you have any more questions? Now, Eldo, can you take up the questions on the chat box?
Yes, sir.
Please.
Will be recorded. Okay.
Yes, sir. We do have a few questions.
Yeah, please tell me, sir.
What is the advantages of DC coupled system?
Sir, DC coupled is very advantageous when your intention is to store majority of your energy. Okay. For example, if there is a load in a off-grid village, okay, where usually solar generates during daytime when the loads are less, where the generation is more, and you want to use that energy to store to your battery so that you can use it in the evening time. Because of the DC coupled nature, let me go back to the slide, the efficiency of charging the battery is best. So this will lead to, better energy drawn out of the batteries. Will give some certain economy also, because you need not install more batteries or more PV in order to achieve the same thing. Here, if you go back, only one converter it goes and charges the batteries, and the efficiency of usually the MPPT DC-DC converters are more than 99%. So most of the energy what you generate will go into the batteries here. But whereas it will pass through two converters in order to go to load. So DC coupled is preferred whenever you have your intention is to store majority of this energy what you are generating. Whereas this works out well where you want to store only part of the energy and majority of the energy you want to send it to grid. Let's say utility scale solar plants where you want to store the energy for your night consumption, usually 5 or not more than 2 to 3% of the generation capacity, then AC coupled is best because whatever you generate is going to loads, only 2 or 3% is charging your batteries.
Okay, thank you, sir. Next question. I would like to know about FEMO's expansion in India in near future.
So to be frank, FEMER wants to have, of course, to be I did not show you the market slides. I thought it might not be relevant to this, but I will anyway show you. See, we have been the market leaders. You see, this was the slide of different manufacturer. You see, it is dominated by many of the Chinese manufacturers. Right from 2013, FEMER, then ABB. So we held the #1 position for continuously for 5 years, where in last 2 years we have dropped to #2, despite many European companies who were #1 one time, and we were nowhere to be seen now. Okay, so we in fact have more than 60 to 70% components which are localized and which is being manufactured in India, and we export 35% of our business is exports. We do close to 1,000 crore business, and it is continuously expanding, and we want to bring in the FEMER's EV charging portfolio also soon into the Indian market, because India will be the huge market for automobile and electric vehicles in the near future in the sense in just 1 or 2 years time, I'm trying to say. So we do have we have worked like OEMs along with the OEMs with putting their logos onto our EV charger. So we are going to have lot of manufacturing and expansion plans, typically in the field of only sustainable business. So we don't have any other business which product also there.